Hello, this is my video on everything you need to know about film and editing techniques. I'll be covering a history of film and cinematography, as well as introducing a number of filming techniques and all the background information that you'll need to know for this unit. So listen up and you'll learn everything you need to know. The first part of this unit is the history of cinematography and filming. We start with early moving images, which includes a history of how the first animations were made, what optical illusions were used as entertainment, and the first productions that were filmed. It all starts with a device called the magic lantern. This is a magic lantern. It was used mostly in 1820 to entertain families because they didn't have many other forms of entertainment. It works by using a concave mirror with a light source at the back to project as much light as possible through a small rectangular piece of glass, also known as a lantern slide, so that the image painted or printed onto the slide is projected onto a screen or a white wall. It would then be enlarged and focused so that the audience could view it. These could have been used to tell stories and to show different images that flowed nicely with the story. But this was about as good as entertainment got in this time period. There was a debate over who invented this device, but the most believed story is that Christian Huygens invented the original model. The type of entertainment that comes next is a build-on from these static images and uses the art of optical illusion. This is a thaumatrope. It was a very popular Victorian toy developed in 1825. The way it works is that there is an image painted on either side of the disc, and then it is spun quickly so that the images appear to merge together. It is a French invention and is believed to be invented by either John Ayrton, Paris, or Peter Marc Roget. This is a step forward from the magic lantern because it is believed to be a moving image and is definitely less static. Here is my example of a thaumatrope that I have made. This is what it would look like when it's in action. As you can see, the bird and the cage merge together so that the bird is in the cage, but upside down because I messed it up. After this, there was a big step in the way moving images were produced. It went from being a toy to another form of entertainment. This is from the invention of the zoetrope. The zoetrope was mostly popular in 1833. It is a spinning cylinder that has vertical slits along its outside that you look into. On the inside there is a strip of pictures that are sequenced and you spin around really fast so that they give the illusion of motion. The faster you spin the wheel, the clearer the moving images become. It was still pretty obvious that the illusion was just an illusion. However, it was still a development from the thaumatrope because there were sequenced images moving rather than just one, so it gave a bigger sense of motion. The next invention is very similar to the zoetrope, but it's a little bit more advanced. This is the Praxinoscope. It was popular in 1877, where it was invented in France by Charles Émile Reynaud. This design is a bit more advanced because it uses mirrors to show the images. There is an inner cylinder of images, which are reflected using a smaller cylinder of mirrors into a viewing window. The cylinder with the images is spun so that they are reflected up to the viewing window, and you have the illusion of motion again. These images are a lot clearer than the ones from the zoetrope, so it's a better development from the classic, although the time gap is a bit big for it to be majorly impressive. Here it is being spun. This is a modern version of it, but you get the idea. The next invention is taking a break from motion. It's the oldest photograph to be recorded, the first photograph ever taken. As you can see, it's a bit fuzzy and grainy, but it's a photograph called View from the Window à la Grasse, and it is exactly that. It was taken in either 1826 or 1827 by Joseph Nichemont Niepce, another Frenchman. The exposure is thought to have been for about 8 hours, and a lot of chemicals were used to develop it. But the reason that this is so important and revolutionary is because no one had ever been able to capture a moment before. They would always have had to have drawn or painted them, but now it was possible, even if the exposure would have taken up most of the day. It was a big step forward in technology. The next person in this presentation uses the new invention of photography. This person is Edward Muybridge, and he used photography to prove whether a horse removed all of its feet off the ground when it gallops. In 1878, Muybridge proved that a horse did, in fact, remove all of its legs off the ground while galloping. He proved it by lining 12 cameras along a racing track and using a thread so that when the horse galloped past, it would pull the thread and take a photo. This wouldn't affect the horse's gallop at all. And then he then produced his contact sheet, and then he played the images through his invention of the zoopraxiscope, so that the audience could see how the horse moved when it galloped. This was the result. This was a development because it was really the first time that someone had used photos to make a motion picture, so this inspired people to use cameras to try and make a film. Here is my version of the technique that Aidan Muybridge used. We shot these using 12 photos and cut them all together to look like it's one movement. This leads us on to our next inventors, the Lumiere brothers. In 1895, the Lumiere brothers produced the first film. It was about workers leaving the factory. It was revolutionary because no one had really done this before. The roll of film to film the 50 seconds of this was 17 metres long, and it was shown privately with a few other short films with an admission fee in a cafe. People could now record events that happened as well as photos. The camera was stationary during these films because the camera was a delicate piece of equipment that people didn't want to damage it because they were also expensive. This started a new form of entertainment, of films, which leads us to the next development in cinematography and film, storytelling. So, for early moving images, we have established how film came to be, how the first animations were made, and even how photography started. But we haven't seen or heard anything about filming techniques that were used because they hadn't been invented yet. So, what was the purpose of film by this point? By this point in time, it was purely entertainment and experimenting, although there wasn't much experimenting. New devices were being invented all the time, and people were getting a lot of entertainment out of them because there wasn't that much else to do if you were wealthy and had everything else you could possibly want. Of course, only the rich would have experienced all of the storytelling and entertainment. This brings us to the next section of this unit, which is storytelling. This was the purpose of film by this point in time, and there were a few people that helped bring the stories to life with the use of filming techniques. There was also the use of special effects starting to show through, and the entertainment value is starting to peak. However, these are still silent movies. This is Millet. He made a 3-hour-long film called Voyage to the Moon in 1902. It included a lot of special effects that hadn't been used before. His techniques were unique, and he was often referred to as the magician of film because of his creative methods. Millet knew the Lumiere brothers and had tried to buy cameras off them before, but they denied him, so he got his own and used many models of cameras in his time. This production was a big development because he had used new techniques, and it was a long film that people paid to see. He sort of spurred on cinemas. In this film, it shows a group of people travelling to the moon, and when they get to the moon, they end up crashing into its face. This is where he uses special effects to show the crash of the rocket. Have you noticed how often the camera is moving? That's right, it isn't moving. This is because the technology was so new and fragile that Millet didn't want to break the camera by moving it around. Also, not many filming techniques have been invented yet, so the actors do all of the running around and moving while the camera stays in one place. This also gives it to the feel that is the stage production, which is something that people of the time didn't quite want to let go of yet. So the purpose of this film is to tell a story and to entertain an audience. I think that this film would probably have been classed as a comedy or a sci-fi film in its time. Moving on, this is D.W. Griffiths' work in 1915. He produced a very controversial film that is sometimes referred to as the most racist film ever made. But this film is important because of its use of shot sizes and the fact that he moved his camera around. No one had really done this effectively before, so rather than just using music to cast emotions in his films, he used shot sizes, which was effective. He changed the way films were made because before him, they were filmed like theatre productions. He used shot sizes such as close-ups, extreme long shots, mid-shots, and long shots. This is Lev Kuleshov. He wanted to explore the way that people react to certain images, so his experiment was to take one picture of his own face, not showing any sort of emotion really, and take pictures of meaningful images, for example, a bowl of food, a coffin, a woman. This was to see how the audience would think his face changes when he puts it after each image. So when he shows a bowl of food and then his face, the audience would look and say, he looks hungry. Naturally, his face is just his face. There isn't any hungry emotion there. So this changed the way people use the emotions in filming, because they knew that by showing certain images, the actors wouldn't have to try so hard to look effective, because the audience would automatically assume that it's like this. Here is an example that my group made. It isn't as effective as the original, but you get the idea. So, for storytelling, we've learned that Millais used the first decent special effects that were revolutionary for the time period, and D.W. Griffith produced a very racist and controversial film that used a lot of different shot sizes in order to show emotions and engross the audience in its story. Moving on to the next section of this unit, we have montage. The use of montages is quite common and is used as a sort of special effect to show something happening that is an illusion. This is where you make an impression that something has happened by using a lot of shots in a small space of time to give the illusion that something has happened that actually hasn't happened. For example, Hitchcock explains it as a mosaic of images that are all being composed into one thing. In the scene, Psycho shows a woman in the shower who gets stabbed several times by a masked man. Obviously they couldn't actually stab the woman because that's illegal. So they used a series of different shots to cast the illusion that the woman has been stabbed loads of times by the man. You can use this technique for many things, like shooting people or people falling off massive cliffs, things that we would use CGI or special effects for in today's films. Sergei Eisenstein used Soviet montage to show people getting shot and casting an air of excitement and anticipation at the start of his film. He uses different shot sizes of wide shots, mid shots, and close-ups to cast the impression that people have been killed or that an explosion has just occurred, like in this example, where the man throws a hand grenade and you see his face, a close-up of the grenade, then him throwing it, then the explosion where everybody is running. You don't actually see the actual explosion because that would have killed a lot of actors, so a montage was used. So montages were good before we could use graphics and CGI to show someone being brutally murdered. Also, they cast good illusions that us, the audience, believe and stay engrossed in the story because of them. This brings us to shot types and camera movements. These are important for framing your shots because there are certain shots that can cast the emotions that you are after and shots that won't. So this is about choosing the right shots for your purpose. I have prepared 8 examples. This is my example of shot variations. I had to choose 8 different shots and film them. These are the results I came up with. The first shot that I've used is a bird's eye view shot. This shot is where you look down on characters and situations to develop an air of dominance or intimidation. This could be used to display a bully intimidating a victim or a boss character conversing with an employee. The whole point of this shot is to make people and objects look small and maybe a little bit insignificant. My second shot is a worm's eye view shot, which is essentially the opposite of a bird's eye view. This shot is from below, looking up at a character or situation to cast the impression of being intimidated or being a less dominant character. It could be used as a point of view of a victim or an employee conversing with a boss. The point of this shot is to make people and objects look big and very significant so that they fill up the screen and really cast an air of intimidation or size. My third shot is a wide shot, also known as a long shot. This shot is used to show a character or object in the environment immediately around it. It gives you a sense of location, as well as what the character's emotions might be. It also allows you to see multiple characters at the same time, so you can establish who is where and what might be happening. This shot must include the whole character, maybe with a bit of space left around them in the frame too. My fourth shot is a mid-shot. This shot is used to show the emotions in the character without it being too intrusive. It allows us to see what is happening around the characters while being able to hear and get immersed in any conversation that might be taking place. It isn't usually used for many intimate moments, but it can be used in instances like this, where I've used it for idle conversation that isn't really that interesting. This shot must show the waist to the top of the head. The fifth shot that I chose was a close-up. This shot allows us to see any emotion on a character's face, and it also allows us a good look at any important objects in a scene. This shot can help build up a lot of suspense if used in the right way. This shot is mostly used to show important feeling, gestures, and objects in scenes. This shot must be from above the shoulders to the top of the head, but if it is an object, then it must be this equivalent. My sixth shot is an extreme close-up. This shot isn't used very often anymore, but if it is used, then it is usually used to show tension or fear. This shot is mostly used in horror films and just shows certain aspects of a person's face. Like in this example, I used extreme close-up of the girl's eyes. This could be used to show someone's ear, nose or mouth to show what other senses might be important. This shot must be equivalent to someone's eyes or other facial feature. The seventh shot that I have chosen is a tilt. This isn't a shot size, this is a camera movement. This is where the camera is sat in one location and is being moved up and down so that the lens points from the floor to the ceiling. This can be used to show the arrival of a new character. If the shot starts at their feet then travels up their body, then it can make a good point of view shot. This can also be used for assessing a new environment. As long as the camera lens points from the floor and travels up to the ceiling, or the opposite of this, then it is a tilt. The final shot that I chose to shoot is a pan. This is another camera movement where the camera is placed in one position and the lens is made to go from left to right. It's sort of like scanning the area. This shot can be used to establish a new location as a good point of view shot, or as a way of seeing a lot of characters at once in the same location. But as long as the camera moves from right to left or left to right, then it is a pan. So, for shot types and camera angles and movements, we learn how we can use these to manipulate the feel of a scene and the feelings of the characters for a more visual reference. So you now know how important the framing of your shots and what shot sizes to use are.